to introduce the two speakers for today. It's a really interesting, really relevant webinar, and I hope they managed to get you interested, get everyone interested in helping with this huge topic with teacher policy. So we have Joseph Kaleba from DRC. He's joining us from China because he's studying there at the moment. He has a PhD in English didactics, MEd, ELP, Associate Professor. He's an English EFL teacher trainer and an English club specialist. And we also have Kennedy from Elton in Nigeria. Kennedy Edegbe has a BA in English and Literature. He also has an MA in Literature and a PhD in Literature. He also has a certificate in TESOL, and he's a lecturer, teacher and educator. And he's the president of the Teacher Association in Nigeria, Elton. I would like to hand over now to who is it? Joseph, yes.
Thank you, Linda, for granting me the floor. Hey, everyone. As Linda said, this webinar is typically about teacher policy, and we're gonna see how these policies are important. We will look at some successful examples, and we share some teacher policies from different countries in Sub-Saharan Africa especially, and discuss the importance of this teacher policy in achieving SDG4. And then we'll just share some action that we can take as teachers. So as we can see next, it is about teacher-centered, and teachers are to answer these questions. Like, in your own countries, do you know anything about teacher policy? If you have some answers, you can just type in the chat box. And if you know what type of these policies that are in your countries, and if these policies affect teachers when they are teaching, and who decides on these policies in your country, and can we affect or influence teacher policy? Then if you have some answers to these questions, please feel free to type on the chat box. I can see some people are saying yes, that is good. So you can answer what type of policies that you have in your countries. We will summarize some. Okay. So someone says he doesn't know any policy. That is good. So maybe you will learn from others here. And this is one also of the importance of this webinar. That is fine. Okay. Excellent. Kenya, okay, nobody? Excellent, I can see something from Kenya. Well, now, looking at some examples, let me start with DRC. I'm going only to mention 3 policies. The first one is free education for primary school education. So free education at primary school level in DRC has been recently initiated, and it is giving chance for all the children to go to school, even if the parents do not have the means to school them. So this policy has been implemented in DRC 3 years ago. The second one is the shift from the 6-year program to 8-year basic education. Formerly, in DRC, primary school could stop only until P6. But recently, there is a new policy that has been introduced, which goes until 7th and 8th years. And the other program is the Bologna program. It's university. In French, we call it LMD, license, masters, and doctorates. So all these 3 policies have been being implemented in DRC, and we are going to see if they are really helping us to reach the SDG goal or no. Over to you, Ken.
I think good day, everyone. I think in terms of policies, like someone did say that they don't know of any policies. I think if anyone has taken a teacher education training, you would have gone through the national policy on education of each of our countries. In Nigeria, I think one of the recent one is the National Policy on Education in 2013, which is the 6th edition of the policy. And in that policy, I'm going to look at it from another angle. We are talking about the teacher education, that all institutions shall, teachers in all levels of institutions should be professionally trained and should be integrated into the education curriculum. Then also we have another policy which says that the minimum level of teachers qualification should be the national certificates in education, and the nation also has the Teachers Registration Council of Nigeria, which oversees the registration and standardization of teaching and giving of licenses to teachers in Nigeria. Over to you, Joseph.
Thank you very much. Now, looking at the US Sustainable Development Goals. Oh, sorry. Yes. How do we understand? How do we understand? This is
actually you, Kennedy. This is Kennedy.
I think so. I think so. Kennedy.
Okay. Talking about the teacher education, teacher policy, what it means is there are policies which dictate how teachers are trained, how teachers are supported, how teachers are motivated, and directly influencing the classroom dynamics and the student outcomes. So when you look at the teacher policy, whole lot of things are embedded in the teacher policies, which has to do with professional development, the working conditions, the effectiveness of teacher, and they encompass the different rules, regulations, guidelines, and initiatives. So looking at the teacher policies also, we also talk about the standard of teacher certification, like I did talk about the Nigerian situation where we have the Teachers Registration Council of Nigeria, TRCN. There are also different professional development requirements, which has to do with training and retraining. Then you also have the performance evaluation frameworks and incentives for excellence in teaching. I think all of these, in one way or the other, influence the teacher policy in each of our countries. I think next.
Again, you?
Next. Next slide, please. Okay. Looking at the role of the teacher policy in education, quality, and effectiveness, it is often said that well-designed teacher policies are essential for improving student outcomes and overall educational quality. That is according to Hanushek and Rifkin in 2010. Even in Nigeria here, there is a popular saying that says that no school or educational level can grow above the quality of its teacher. And that is a very, very important thing for us to look at. So effective teachers' policies can also help to attract and retain high-quality educators and provide them with the necessary support and resources to excel in their roles and ultimately contribute to positive learning and experiences for the students. So the persons who gain ultimately from the teacher policy are the students who are the receiving end of what the teacher does. Next. Joseph.
Thanks. And now looking, building on what Professor Kennedy has just said about teacher policy and lining it with the issues inclusive and equitable quality education, and it promotes lifelong learning opportunity for all. The questions for you teachers who are now following this webinar, remember we said you are centered of this one. Has this been achieved? If you have an answer, please, you can just write your answer in the chat box. And if you think that it has been achieved, please let us know. And another question is, will it really be achieved? What is this? Equitable education, lifelong learning opportunities. And if they have not been achieved yet, why? Are there any reasons that these, okay, I can see some people are saying, yeah, in Sudan, not in Sudan, of course. And why not? Why not? Please comment in the chat to see why these policies are not achieved and what is making them not achieved. Next. As we are reading the answers, some people are saying government. Okay, next. Yes. Now, let's take a look at these targets. Say, first is free primary education and secondary education. Remember, very soon I was just talking about free education in DRC, and this has been happening in so many countries. This is also education for sustainable development and global citizenship. Another target is equal access to affordable technical and vocational higher education, eliminating also all discrimination in education and increasing the supply of quality. What can we do to achieve them? If you have any answer, constructive answers, I think you can chat in the box. What can we do to achieve really free primary education? If there is free primary education, is there quality education? If we have these policies, are they sustainable? And then in Sub-Saharan Africa, have we been able to achieve this? I think no, to be honest. Even the UK, even the US, of course, they are trying their best, but still they haven't achieved this goal. And for us in Africa, for example, it's not our fault. So we should not blame ourselves for that. The only thing we can do is to try our best. And this is one of the objectives of this webinar, to sensitize and mobilize you teachers, colleagues, to play your roles as teachers, to work, to push the government in order to work on proper policy so that we can achieve this aim as we are seeing. Next. And how can we do that? In our classrooms, at home, but I think with teacher union, we can do something. And now you can see this link that we provide here. We can find more information on the target, on the progress, and the indicators of all these policies. Please, I would like to invite teachers to use this link and explore them. It contains constructive ideas that can help us, and we can just go forward. Over to you, Kennedy.
Okay, thank you, Joseph. Next slide, please.
Challenges with the teacher policy in sub-Saharan countries.
Okay, challenges with teacher policies in sub-Saharan African countries. You will find that there are a lot of challenges which we have had in sub-Saharan African countries. One of them is the inadequate funding for education. If you look at all our countries that are in Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, except for some few, you find out that there are a lot of countries that fall below, that have a shortfall, which is below the minimum for educational budgets across the sub-Saharan African country. So that makes it to us to have inadequate funding, and that gets us into strike, and a lot of people exiting from the teaching profession, because in Nigeria here, it is often said that the teacher's reward is in heaven, and a lot of people, due to that, because they are poorly paid or remunerated, they exit the profession. Another thing again is we have a lot of shortage of qualified teachers, because the profession is not encouraging somehow, to some extent, a lot of people shy away from getting into them, the profession. And what you find is a lot of people who are not properly educated in the teaching, in the business of teaching to such profession, and it also lowers the quality of education. We also have insufficient professional development opportunities for teachers, which are also given by the government. Sometimes they are non-existent in some places across Africa, and sometimes too, you find that the government, they pay lip service to the professional development opportunities for teachers. And sometimes even when they are in the budget, we find that there's a problem because due to corruption, activities of corruption, they are either non-existent for the teachers. So it makes us not to achieve the goals which we ought to achieve as teacher in the teacher education policies. Then also we talk about limited access to teaching resources. You find teaching resources are hard scarce in most of the countries in Sub-Saharan Africa. Then you also find that there is the problem of political instability. Because of political instability here and there, we see a lot of policies from assault and frequent changes in policies. And this is one of the things that is part of the challenges which we have also had in Sub-Saharan Africa. Then one question I'm going to ask us is, how do these challenges affect teaching and learning in your own environment? You can write that in the chat and let's get some quick answers to support some of the points of discussion which we have given. Somebody says haphazard policies and maladministration. Yes. Somebody said that some of these policies are peculiar to Nigeria. Somebody says that there's high rate of unemployment. Qualified teachers are also not employed by the teacher, hence they look elsewhere. Then somebody says from the private sector education here in Nigeria, parental influence has affected the teaching and learning as they are seen. So we have so many issues stemming from that. Next. Thank you for your chats. Next. Okay, we are looking at the impact of these challenges on teaching and learning. And because of these impacts, you find that there is high teacher turnover rates. What we mean by high teacher turnover rate is that you find a lot of people coming into the profession and they are going out incessantly and they don't want to stay. Hardly in some schools, especially in some of our countries, you find that teachers just move in and get out. So you hardly find a teacher teaching for more than 5 years in some of these places. Then another of the consequence or challenge, the impact is that there is the low morale among educators because they are poorly remunerated. And most times you find out that the remuneration is something that can't take them home, like we popularly say in Nigeria that our take-home pay can't take us home. It brings in a lot of morale and it affects the quality of the work the teachers they do. There is also limited access to quality education for students. As a result, the learning outcomes suffer and the overall quality of education is compromised. So you find a lot of these problems affecting the Nigerian system and even the Sub-Saharan Africa at large. I think it's a common problem across the Sub-Saharan Africa. Next. Next. Then looking at the key dimensions of teacher policy, some of the key dimensions are recruitment. Some of them, you will find that there is hardly enough qualified teachers, and most times you find that we can't even attract qualified candidates. And most times, because of the recruitment drive, which sometimes are bedeviled with corruption, it's difficult to also attract qualified candidates, even though we have so many who are qualified. Then also there's this issue of ensuring continuous professional development. So it is also there. In some countries, we have some standardized level by the type of agencies that are appointed to oversee teacher education. Then we also talk about the qualification, the standards and benchmark for teacher education. In some of these countries, you will find that we hardly meet up to this level, so there's still that issue or problem. Then there is also the issue of motivation. A lot of times, our teachers are not necessarily recognized for teaching excellence and also given incentives. This also dampen the spirit or the morale of such teachers. Then we also have the support. There are no support resources to support the system and resources and support system for teachers. So that also affects in one way or the other. Then in terms of governance structure for policy, there are structures for policy and oversight and accountability. But the question is, how can we remedy this? Looking at this, it is important that in recruitment processes, only qualified teachers are employed. It is also imperative for our government to ensure that there is a continuous professional development for our teachers. And it's also important too that the quality of teachers should be enhanced through in-service training for teachers to also improve the quality of teachers. In terms of motivation, there should be more incentives and recognition for teaching, for teachers, for teaching excellence rather. And this will bring in more people into the system. When there are also resources and support systems for teachers too, it will also help to boost the governance. It will also help to boost the morale of the teachers. And if effective governance and structure for policy oversight and accountability by means of proper supervision are done, these are some of the things that can remedy our situation. Over now to Joseph.
Thank you. Next. Now, as we are talking about teacher policy, let's now see some case studies. Let's see some case study. Next slide. So the case studies, and we are going to look into some best practices in these countries. Are we there? Okay, then. So when we see these case studies, we will see what are the lessons that we learn from these case studies. Let's just take, for example, some developed country first before we come to our African countries. Let's take the example of Finland. In Finland, these teachers are just performing. The policy here is really high. They have a high education system in Finland, actually. And their policies prioritize teacher training. They also value professional development and autonomy in the classroom. Teachers are not dependent. They develop a sense of autonomy in the classroom where they can use real material, authentic material, realia, and they can even embed some of the things in the curriculum. So they have a kind of autonomy, which is a very good example. And teachers in Finland are highly qualified, as you can see it, and they receive continuous support to improve their teaching process, which is a very good example. How about China, from where I'm speaking? China has made a significant strides in improving teacher quality. And how do they do that? They do it through policy reforms. There are so many reforms taking place in China. And this country is focused on enhancing teachers' training programs. They start by pre-service training, and before teachers are employed, they receive some training programs. And even when they are in service, there are also some in-service training that China education system have stable programs that they are providing with their teachers. So these reforms have contributed to improve the student outcome and overall educational quality. How about the UK? The UK has implemented teacher policy reform, and this reform, they aim at raising standards in education. Actually, in the UK, they promote high standards of teachers, and there are initiatives like introduction of national curriculum and performance based on teacher and increase accountability. So teachers are accountable. Educational, the people, different level, they are accountable for measuring this to help improve the teaching quality. I think these are good examples. The USA is also in a good track. They're even higher. This teacher reform, they have focused on increasing teacher incentives, effectiveness, and the accountability again. And some of the policies that they promote in the US, we have like core state standards, just like in the UK. And teacher evaluation system, they evaluate teachers. How do they evaluate them? Based on the students' performance. So they are looking at the success of the policy from the student achievement, which is a very good example to follow. But now, how about also some African countries? Let's take the example of Ethiopia. Ethiopia also has implemented teacher policy reform to address some challenges that are related to teacher problem, teacher recruitment, and teacher training. Actually, in Ethiopia, they look at the recruitment. They don't recruit anyhow. And after recruiting teachers, they also continue with some professional development training, which is also a good example to follow. Of course, Ethiopia benefits sometimes a lot with the support by the British Council, which also organize and foster some online and face-to-face training. Sometimes Ethiopia organizes some regional events, and some teachers from Sub-Saharan Africa, they can gather in Ethiopia to receive some training. Also, Senegal has the same teacher quality and retention. In Senegal, actually, they try to make their efforts to retain the teachers that have been recruited. And they do this, I think, through some incentives. So before I can go any further about the lesson learned from this case study, I would like Professor Kennedy to tell us something about Nigeria and South Africa. Over to you, Professor Kennedy.
I think starting with South Africa, their teacher policy are very, very good. I think it's one of the successful teacher policy in Africa, because there are a lot of concrete policies which they have put in place. Even though in most cases, some of these policies might not be 100% as it were, but you find that there is a lot of strides which have been made And this is very, very important. Then looking at it from the Nigerian perspective, can we say that we have tried as a country, Nigeria? Yes, we have tried. Are we where we want to be? Not yet where we want to be, but you find that there are a lot of innovations that have been brought into the education policy, which are very, very important. But I think even though we have not achieved all of them yet, but I say that we are making a giant or positive steps towards them, because looking at the policy on education now, you find that there are plans for making sure that information and communication technology are embedded into the teaching program. There is also the talking about the internship for teachers so that they can also have hands-on experience, and the registration and the recruitment level. But at the government level, I think to a great extent, some of these things are being done. But in the private sector, in some of the cases where you have some low-profile schools, you find that those things are not being. But by and large, I think when we grow up to the extent where we can make sure that our level of supervision is increased and much more robust, some of these things will be stemmed. Over to you, Joseph.
Thank you. So if we continue with the case studies, we can come back again to Senegal. We can come back to Senegal, where these policies have been implemented and they are enhancing teacher training programs, and they provide also support from professional development. For example, this webinar is being organized from Senegal, and so many teachers around Africa, maybe around the world, are benefiting from this one. So Senegal is also providing this even not only for teachers in Senegal as a country, but worldwide, which is also a best practice that we can also highlight. But now, what are the lessons that we are learning from all these policies and the best practices, as we can mention them? If we summarize this, we'll see that most of these countries that are trying their best in teacher policies, they are prioritizing teacher training and professional development, which is a key. So now, if a teacher finds themselves in a country which does not promote teacher training program, can we stay like that? As teachers, I think, no, we need to work on how to push the government also in one or another, how they can also have such a program, because we are learning here that some countries are doing well because of the teacher training programs that they have. So this country also, they provide incentives for excellence in teaching. You cannot just work with teachers without also taking care of them. And incentives are of different kinds. You can just motivate teachers with some money, some additional salaries. Sometimes you can also give them some qualifications. You can give them some prize and whatever. They can even have some different positions. All these motivate teachers to go further. You can also see that from all these case studies that we have talked about, Professor Kennedy and I, these countries have been implementing performance-based assessment. As you can see in the US, for example, they assess teachers on base of student performance. In the UK, they assess teachers based on learners' outcome, which is very good example. I think these these practices are good example, and these are the good lesson that we can learn from this one. And there is also collaboration. There are efforts that they are making in collaborating in different stages, these stakeholders. Professor Kennedy can share with us some other opportunities, some other cases that we can also follow. Over to you, Professor Kennedy.
I think just to add to what Joseph has said, like Linda stated on the charts, it is very important for us to take note that the teacher associations, like we have in our different countries, working with the British Council, they are also doing a lot. And you find out that this is one of the key things that that is helping a lot of teachers and giving teachers a lot of resources to help them better their skills. And with that, I want to introduce us to some of our English Connect resources. There is a webinar on the link that is shared now. It is on https://africa.teachingenglish.uk/skills/webinars using historical structural approach bridge gap between educational policies and practice. I think a lot of us can go to that and begin to see how we can bridge bridge the goal, bridge the gap between educational policy and practice. That is a very good document there, which is done by the British Council in South Africa. At least they have a model which we will like people to see and understand better. Next, please. Next slide. Okay. There is also another publication about the language policy in Africa, which is a book that a lot of people have contributed to. It is a lot much deeper on the language policy politics development. I think it's also another good one for us teachers to look into, because there are a lot of controversies when it comes to language policy. I think it is very important for us to look at that document. You can go onto the website and also look at it. Next.
Okay, thank you, Professor Kennedy, for all these links. I hope that they are going to help also many other teachers to learn more about what is happening. Now, it's time for action. We need now to call for action for stakeholders, knowing that teachers, as we are also one of these stakeholders. It's again time to write your ideas in the chat box so that we see what we can do, what are actions that we can take based on all what you have just been discussing, the case studies, the teacher policies in different countries. The first question is, what can we do to affect the policy in our countries? So each individual can now find ideas that can contribute with, and we need your answers in the chat box. The second question is, how can we use the SDG4 targets to help shape the policy? The other question is, what sort of policies do we want and how we can work towards them? I was a little bit interested when I read inbox, one of the teachers said they know nothing about teacher policies. But I think from this webinar, we have discussed few of teacher policies, and building on these policies, you can be able to answer these questions. Your ideas are needed. I haven't seen anyone answering. Maybe let me remind the first question. Okay, someone says, okay, to make education access to all, okay, teacher policies can be reviewed. Of course, I think revisiting teacher policies is a key. You are really right. Some countries have teacher policies, of course, but they need to be revisited. I agree. Send us the what? Oh, they are asking the link. Maybe the link will be sent. I think Steve promised that on Monday, this recording will be shared. The link will be shared, and Those who did not have opportunities to follow, they will have it, no problem. Upgrading.
I think he's talking about the link to the
updating teacher
publication,
policy.
Joseph.
Sorry?
The link to the publications which I discussed. I think that is what the person is asking for. So I think it will be okay if the link is shared so that they can also copy it and have it to look at it.
Yeah, I will share the link here in the chat as well.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Yeah, I can also see that someone also is suggesting that teacher policy should be updated. Of course, this is what we mean by revisiting the teacher policies. We need really to make some innovations. And someone was saying is from, and then it is gone, changing education system. Of course, how do we change it? How do we change the education system? And more professional development, of course, that is good. That is good. From Nigeria? Oh, no, the chat is gone. Maybe you can repeat that one. Teaching is dynamics. Yes, it should not be statics. It is dynamics. I think there are so many good ideas. Teacher association, I like this idea, right? Yes, teacher association. In other terms, we call them teacher unions. I think teacher unions have to play a paramount role on pushing the government in order to make some innovations in the teacher policies. So we have a channel. We can use teacher union as a channel for us to advocate the cause of the teachers, because after all, we all want to reach the SDG4 goal. And in so doing, we can just improve our education system. So if you are a teacher and you don't belong to any teacher association, I think it is now time. It is now time. And also, we need to understand there are teacher association and teacher union, maybe the different connotations. If your teacher association is working hand in hand with the government, do they make some actions that reach the government and that can be heard? Or you are just working as association, but in a private way, and you don't have even a platform where we can interact with the government. This is also important. So those teacher associations or teacher union that have not been official and that do not work with the government, I think it's time, because it is only one of the ways we teachers, we can channel our voice in order to contribute to the quality education. So it is time for questions. If you have any questions about what we have been saying during this webinar, your questions are welcome. In the meantime, I would like to thank you for your active participation and also thank Professor Kennedy. We also thank Steve, our moderator, and Linda, our teacher mentor. Thank you very much, and your questions are welcome.
Thank you so much, Joseph and Kennedy. That was so interesting and such an important topic. And it's great to see so much interactivity in the chat and so many brilliant ideas. Now, if all these ideas could be worked on, what a wonderful change in education that would be. We do have a few minutes left for questions, and I only found 2 questions in the chat so far. So I think I'll ask them first. The first one was, how can teacher policy be adapted for slow learners and learners with dyslexia and dysgraphia, for example? Kennedy or Joseph, do you have any idea about that one?
I think any policy that is worth the while is one that caters for all level of all cadre of students. And of course, what is important is that in ensuring that such levels of students are catered for, the policy must capture students that are slow learners or have students generally with disabilities, and that must be taken care of. If they are not part of such policies, it means that the SDG4 4 goals will not be achieved. I think it is very important to do that.
I agree there. That's about inclusivity, isn't it? Including everybody.
Yes,
And for this to
inclusivity,
work,
yeah.
we have to include all types of learners, don't we? Yeah. There was another question. Maybe Joseph can answer this one. What is the role of the classroom teacher to improve educational policies in a particular country? So I think many teachers are probably thinking this. What's it got to do with me? What can I do? So what can a classroom teacher do? Joseph?
Okay, this is a very, very good question, Linda, and I can thank the one who has asked it, because this is a practical question. A classroom teacher has a paramount role to play in contributing to teacher education quality, in the sense that, first of all, they are the ones who implement the curricula in their countries. So in so doing, teachers should be aware of the fact that curriculum is there, but they need to customize the curriculum. Teachers themselves need to be aware of the changes that are happening, and they can just develop this mechanism of bringing the world into the classroom and also taking the classroom to the world. So they need to teach for creativity and innovation. They need also to collaborate with other teachers. Since they can collaborate with others, they can influence others, they can also share best practices with others. Also, a classroom teacher is a member of teacher union or teacher association. And when they meet with other teachers in such gatherings, such platform, they no longer stay only in the classroom. They are sharing their experiences of that they experience in the classroom with others, and this can lead to proposing some policy, because they can bring practical answers to what they are living in the classroom on the daily basis.
Yeah, that's it's great. It's a very complicated question, isn't it? And yeah, this was another question in the
Yes.
in the chat as well about how can any individual teacher help? Yeah, there's a few more questions there. How can governments attract students to be interested in becoming and training as teachers? Would either of you like to answer that one?
I think the way they can is by making sure that one way they can attract is by making sure that the remuneration for teachers is improved upon. Then not just only remuneration, just the way teachers are taking, the perception, the general perception of teachers about teachers in the society, and the kind of motivation that the teachers would also get. So you find that if all these are not in place, it will be difficult for anyone to want to join a profession that those who are already in it are not being well catered for. Thank you.
Yeah, there are loads more questions coming in.
Can I add something?
Yes, Joseph.
Yes. Yeah, the government actually can motivate teachers, those who are learning, who are students, to also become teachers in the way they treat teachers. For example, there are some countries that establish the payment based on only the qualification. If you have a BA degree, for example, no matter which post you occupy in the country, you have the same salary. You can be in teaching, you can be in administration, you can be in the other organization, but you have the same you have the same salary. So if the government develops such a policy, no one will neglect the teaching career, because they will be getting the same salary as others. This is one of the strategies that the government can develop to motivate teachers to value the teaching career, instead of just giving bad treatment to the teachers and showing that it is in other domain that people can be well paid. I think this can be one of the strategies. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. I think we need to make a difference here between the teacher associations and the teaching unions, because they're very different sorts of things, aren't they? Because the teacher associations are things like, of course, Elton and CLASS, your teacher associations, and they don't necessarily work with the governments. They're working with the teachers, aren't they? But the unions are representing teachers and working with the governments. And I think both of these can have really important roles in bringing these questions forward. Another question here was, how can you get teachers to learn more about the educational policies that directly affect them? Well, what role do you think teacher associations have there? Kennedy?
I think for anyone who studies education in the university or the colleges of education or teacher training colleges, as the case may be, there is always a course which is usually on the national policy of the different countries where they reside. But I think, be that as it may, even when such is not available in any of these schools, I think it should be part of the government's responsibility to making sure that such policies are passed on to the teachers when they are recruited. Then apart from that too, in terms of professional development or in-service training, I think these are things that the government can also bring to the purview of the teachers for them to begin to see what they actually need them to know about the policies that work or directly affect their work within the different schools where they teach. So
yeah,
I think
the teacher associations, though, can play a big role in this as well. Maybe
yes.
each teacher association can get the one role they can play is telling all the teachers, their members, what the policies are. Yeah.
Of course, that can be part of it. But of course, when you look at the teacher associations, you find that that will not cut across all the teachers at the time. Unlike when the government does it.
You're right. Yeah.
Linda, can I say a word about teacher union and teacher association?
We've got 1 minute. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Linda, for just giving this distinction. But what we have noticed in some countries from teacher union, what we call in French, syndicat des enseignants, they only focus on claiming for teacher salary. They never claim about teacher policy that can also help improve education. So from this webinar today, teachers have learned that through teacher union, we can also advocate about policies, not only for salaries. This is what I wanted to add.
I think you're right. Yes. I think we need to finish now because it's 2 o'clock. There are loads of questions here. So I hope in the Telegram discussion afterwards, you'll have a lot more discussion about this. And I was just going to ask one final question, which was, where should we start? If you're not in the list of the countries that have introduced reforms, where should you start? And I think that's a good starting point, isn't it?